Welcome to Creative Courage Chats, a search for a new understanding of creativity and problem solving. I'm Alex Raffy.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to another Creative Courage Chats. So, I'm here with Jacob Billings. We don't know each other. We just met through LinkedIn. I put out a call to see if there were, because the purpose of this thing is to reach out to people and share some unknown wisdom, with the world. I don't know you, so it'd be great to hear some of your wisdom. I know that you know what you're talking about, and you have a background in many fields. It's my glasses are my glasses got broken, so I don't have my glasses. So I'm going to work on. So it says here that you're president of Citrus Logic. You're a lecturer, a linguist, ethical hacker, which I think is interesting, and e-commerce guru. These are all good things. Oh, and a photographer. So you have that you have a lot of different things to talk about. But we were jumping in just before this, and I wanted to start it off because you were kind of getting into how programming and linguistics they meshed a little bit.
Yeah. Well, let me give you a quick background, just of kind of how I got into
Yeah, let's do that.
Programming and linguistics. I started off in the University of Utah, as a Middle Eastern Studies major. So I was in the Middle Eastern studies such as history, and I was specializing in biblical Hebrew. And when I was at the university, I disliked very much how they taught languages. I thought it was very backwards. I had already previously I learned Spanish, and the way that the University of Utah and a lot of universities and schools teach languages is they teach you pronunciation, nouns, and grammar before they teach verbs. And if you know verbs, you know about 60 to 75% of a language. So I thought it was rather backwards for them to teach nouns and memorization of nouns and things and grammar before they taught verbs. So I started teaching myself how to program in order to teach languages better, in the way that I thought they should be taught. And that kind of went on to, so I ended up getting a degree in Middle Eastern Studies, and then went on to get almost done with a master's degree in linguistics. And so programming, as I got more and more into programming, originally it was just to teach these languages and create these programs, but people started asking me to do little tweaks and stuff on their website because they didn't know how to do it. So I do that, and eventually kind of morphed into a company where I was doing complete websites and different types of programming, and I would get into situations where people would have their sites hacked, and then they'd be like, "Well, go fix this for me." And when I first started doing it, I was like, well, I don't know how to fix it, but I'll take a look, So I'd go in there and I'd find the exploits and fix them. But it got to be more and more prevalent with malware and stuff on people's websites. So I started getting into, okay, how do we prevent this? How do we make this happen? And it got into basically a situation where I, was actively hacking web pages to prevent people from hacking web pages. So
Sure, yeah.
It was really fun. I really, really enjoy that part of programming.
It makes me think sometimes whenever I think of because it terrifies me, hackers and hacking, and because I don't know anything about that stuff. But I know the horror stories. I've heard lots of the horror stories. But the thing that it reminds me of is and I'm not suggesting that you've ever done this, but some people, in school cheated, at a test. And the amount of time it takes to plan how you're going to cheat, whether you're kind of coming up with the answers and somehow figure out how to bring them in to take the test. The amount of time and creativity that goes into figuring out an interesting way to cheat where you're not going to get caught, you might as well use that time to study. Or you end up not using it. Because I remember I wrote little notes and I made them real small and I wrote down the answers one time, in school. And then when I went around take the test, I was like, I didn't have to look at it because I just remembered from working on it so hard, writing all these answers out. I started answering the questions, and I figured I'll pull it out when I need it, and I ended up not needing it at all.
You actually learned something.
Yeah, yeah, with the intent of doing something wrong, you ended up. And these hackers, it seems like there's so much knowledge and creativity that goes into trying to find out how to steal and manipulate people or hurt them, that you'd think they could just use that energy and do something positive, with it.
Well, most of the time, hackers are actually trying to do something, well, supposedly positive, because most of the time when a site gets hacked, at least smaller sites, it's because they're trying to place some sort of advertising on the site, inconspicuously. So they'll go in and they're trying to place some kind of code in order to redirect to a different site to be able to sell something.
I see.
And so I guess in their own way, they're trying to do something productive and create a business, but it's just not.
It's just a weird. Yeah, there's more legitimate ways maybe of making a living, but it is a huge industry. I mean, it's an actual industry, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's people with 401ks and all they do is do this. They go on vacations and they go back to jobs. They wear suits. They go and sit down. And they hack people's computers, and then they get paid a salary. And I know it's kind of an insane world. There's a lot. Everything's insane right now, but that right there has kind of been around for a long time. A lot of people don't know what it is. I one time I met an actual legit, like, I mean, you might know, be this kind of guy, but the dark web hacker guy. And I met with him because his wife had a business and I was doing some marketing for the business, and he was sitting there in his pajamas in the living room, and he was doing his hacking thing. And then I started having a conversation. I strike up conversations all the time with people, and I started striking up a conversation with him. And it was like I met a unicorn. The stuff that he told me, I couldn't believe what he was. I was like, everything that I thought about the internet is wrong. That we're running on a system that was created in the 80s, and that he goes, we're talking about light here. We're talking about things. When you're downloading and you're watching that little thing, what do you think's going on? Pouring the bag into a thing? No, that's it. It happens like this. And then he showed me a browser he created. And he told me, pick a movie star. And I said, Leonardo DiCaprio. And so he hit a couple keys, and like thousands of pictures of Leonardo DiCaprio popped up. And then he said, watch this. And he hit a download button, and it downloaded every single picture on the internet he could find, was downloaded onto a folder on his computer like that. And it was like, it didn't take time. It just happened. I was like, what is this? It's like, I've never seen it. And he wasn't even connected to anything. It was all on Wi-Fi. You know what I mean? It was really crazy. The whole thing was just totally crazy. The stuff he would say, and he would laugh at me because I didn't know anything. And it was just fun. But anyway.
Yeah, the dark web isn't not a very fun place. I
don't recommend anybody going to that. No,
not at all.
No, very much recommend against it. I've never been there. I wouldn't even go there. But it's a very bad neighborhood. But anyway, so yeah, so when you're talking about the linguistics part of it, I think it's interesting too that you were not pleased with the way that you were being taught linguistics, or you were disagreed with method, and so you actually, instead of accepting the system and the methods, you went ahead and kind of changed it, or went at it a little differently. I think that shows a lot of, I don't know, grit. what to call it. Usually people just accept stuff and just fall into it.
Yeah.
Where does that come from? That arrogance?
I've never been a person that likes the status quo.
Right.
I've always wanted to challenge the status quo, because I mean, sometimes it's the best way to do things, but if we never challenge it, we never really know.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to look at things and say, is this really the best way, or is there a better way to do things? And that's the way innovation's done, right? By looking at the status quo and seeing if it really is the best way. And with technology, very often it changes so rapidly that there almost is no status quo. You just do things the most efficient way that you can. So with the language thing, I just wanted to create. I've always loved languages, so I wanted to create a system where people could go and learn languages quickly and efficiently. And um,
That
in
seems
the
like such
end,
a, it seems so impossible to people, for people to think. I mean, a language is a big thing, you know.
yeah,
If you and the thought of, God, how am I going to learn a new language? I mean, just how long is it going to take? And it's such a huge mountain to climb. It just feels like a big ominous thing. You're saying that there are some quick ways of doing it.
yeah, there are, and I think a lot of it used to be like with like things like Rosetta Stone and Pimsleur.
Hmm.
Rosetta Stone was in that realm of let's teach you nouns and
Yeah,
you
they
know
were
how
on
to say something like
records, right?
that.
Originally they were on little records. I think
Yeah,
I remember. Yeah, I had some of those when I was a kid.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, and then it turned into a computer program, but
yeah.
they would teach it that way. And now when they're kind of getting the hang of, okay, let's teach verbs first and sentence structure, and that's a better way to do things. And so if you can learn a language in that way, and if you can learn a language through immersion, by being in a country that speaks that or around people that speak that, it's a much more effective way to learn a language. And so that was my what I set out to do. And I got so caught up in other things, I started a company programming that I just kind of set that aside for quite a while, and went on to do business automation. So creating systems for companies to automate processes and things like that. And so we did that for quite a while.
You do that from the ground up. So someone has a concept and you're able to just start from ground zero and build it from scratch, kind of. Is that how
Yeah.
you
So
do?
so for example, I mean, a website. People look at a website as kind of a lot of times like an online brochure. What a website should be is a way to manage your whole company. So you should be having things in the cloud, marketing systems, uh, invoicing systems, things like that, in order to make the company work.
Hmm.
But people want to do things so offline, and they want to hire employees to do things that a system should do. And I think a lot of people think that by automating a company, you're putting people out of, you're firing employees and things like that. And really, I look at it from a different perspective. I look at it as a way to, because employees are so overworked, and they're doing the job of three people, that systems really should be put in place in order to ease that burden. I was We did a project for a vacuum company, a vacuum parts distribution company. It was hiring people in their call center because everybody was calling up and trying to find parts for these vacuums, and they were hiring more and more employees. And so, we came up to this solution of, why don't we put these schematics online? People can go and look at the schematic. They can find the part online, click it, and order it, and not have to call into the call center.
Hmm.
And so they actually ended up saving $100K per year because they didn't have to hire so many employees, and the employees that they had were free to do other things. So it makes a lot of difference when you automate like that.
Right.
Um,
But
but
there's a limit, right?
oh sure,
There's
sure.
we need to keep jobs for some people.
Oh sure.
Yeah.
But it needs to be the right jobs for people.
Yep.
So you don't want people going into things that they don't have any expertise
All right.
in.
It's not gonna be like
So
Star Trek where you want a cup of coffee and you just tell the computer and it makes you a cup of coffee. And
right.
yeah, that's
So
good.
we started doing that for a while.
Mhm.
We still do that. And then with the linguistic stuff, um, we about last year, about a year and a half ago, we started doing serious marketing for people. And the linguistics comes into play when you're talking about marketing messages and effective communication strategy, logos and design, because linguistics has a lot to do with that. There's a subfield of linguistics called semiotics, which studies signs basically. And so you look at things like logos and how they are interpreted by people by clients, and how the semantics of the symbol contribute to meaning. So there's you have to look at things like color. If I've got for example, like a fire extinguisher and it had a blue color, we would think differently of it than if it had a red color
Sure. Yeah.
because of the colors used. That's semiotic. So you can analyze logos and websites, and according to your demographic, how those people are going to interpret that site or that logo. So it
Yeah.
makes a big difference.
And people respond to different things. I mean, people respond differently to fonts and the way a font looks, on a logo. And
Yeah.
these are choices. A lot of times they're kind of almost arbitrary choices, but I think that as a designer or a marketing person is actually considering all those things. So I noticed that certain names of certain companies are just weak. They're just weak and they look weak on the page. But there's others that are, that just have strong letters that are used in the name, and those letters look really handsome on the brand. So there's other things you have to do to compensate for those things. But yeah, it's interesting. That's an interesting angle on that as far as how linguistics works with that.
Yeah, and even in the words that you use, I mean, depending on your demographics, you're going to talk to millennials a lot different than you're going to talk to baby boomers, for
Sure.
example, just in the language that you use. So knowing your demographic and how that and how to speak to them is a very important part of communication. I did a recent YouTube video on there and about this character on How I Met Your Mother. It just the way he would talk, and he would use. It's really kind of a hilarious thing. He would use words like he would shorten his words up and use words like future instead of future, or redonk instead of ridiculous. And
Yeah.
it was just the way that his particular demographic spoke to each other. But
It's like talking to your kids sometimes.
yeah,
So sometimes
right.
I need to like my neighbor once says GTS. Yeah, she used the term GTS.
GTS.
And I said, "Oh, I'm going to have to Google that. I don't know what that means." She goes, "That's what it means." She means Google that shit. Because I said something. She goes, "You got a GTS?" And I was like, "I don't know what that means. I'll go look at it," because she's younger than me, But it was pretty funny. But old guy. But so as a linguist, are you well traveled? Have you traveled around quite a bit?
Yeah, I actually live in Guatemala.
Oh,
You're talking to me from Guatemala right now.
oh, okay, cool.
So I live down here with my family, and we
Uh-huh.
lived down here for the past 5 years. And so when we came down here, we actually traveled by car. So we came down through Mexico, down to Guatemala.
Mhm.
And so I've traveled quite a bit in Mexico, all over Guatemala. I lived in the Dominican Republic for a couple of years, and then so I've been over quite a bit. I haven't traveled down into Central America. I wanted to do that this year, but the pandemic hit, so we
Sure,
weren't able
makes it really
to start
tough.
down.
How are things going over there?
Everything's starting to open up little by little. They shut the country down
Sure,
for
yeah,
a long time, and public transportation isn't running right now for the most part. There's some small buses that go around, but that's really kind of hit the country hard because most people here don't have a car, so they get to their different destinations by bus. And if that's not running, then they can't work. They can't, um, do what they need to do. So that's
right.
been pretty hard.
So in Guatemala, is the dialect different than in other parts? Like in Mexico and stuff? Is
Oh, sure.
because my family's from Uruguay, so
Oh, okay.
and so our dialect is very different from a lot of Latino countries. With the je instead of the you sound,
The show.
yo instead of yo, and so sometimes it's funny because when I took Spanish in school, I thought, oh, I'm going to ace this, because I speak Spanish, and the teacher and I'd start reading stuff and I'd say yo y pero and they say and stuff like that, and the teacher would know right away that I was, as soon as she heard the "j" sound, she knew exactly, you know. And there's a lot of different terminology, and like, like even to this day, if I see something that makes me go like, instead of "wow," I'll say "po," because that's something that's in Uruguay they say "po" instead of "wow." There's little silly things like that.
So here in Guatemala, they use vos.
Oh,
They'll so instead of saying like tú tienes, you have, they'll say vos tenés.
vos tenés. Yeah.
Uh-huh. So they'll use that vos. And then, of course, they have their different words that they use.
Yeah.
They say puchica a lot here. It's like wow or my goodness, or kind of it's just an exclamation they use in a number of different circumstances, depending on
Yeah.
the context.
I think it's really important for Americans, especially, to leave the country and to go to other countries and learn a little bit about what it's like to live in other countries. I remember my first visit to Uruguay as a kid. I had met a cousin, and he took me because the George Washington of Uruguay's name's Artigas. It's this man named Artigas, and he's a general, and he fought a war against Brazil and Argentina and kept the freedom. And so he's a big legend. But anyway, his urn, they have a changing of the guard every single day, and his urn is in this big square in the middle of Montevideo, right? And so he took me down into where they keep the urn, and there's all these paintings that depict his life all the way around, and it's beautiful, like black marble and everything, and there's soldiers in there that are surrounding the urn. It's they a lot of respect for this guy. And so I walked in with him, and he starts telling me the history of Artigas. But when he's telling it, he would tell me the equivalent to to American history. So when he's teaching me about his own history of Uruguay, he's telling me about our history. So he knew both. He knew the entire history of America and the history of Uruguay. And I think it's a common thing for other countries sometimes in education and stuff in schools, where they learn a lot about Americans. They learn a lot. They even learn the language. I mean, knowing that it's the most powerful country in the world, you should probably know a little bit about it, right? There's
Right.
this strange. I kind of earned a lot of respect because I lived in Italy also when I was a kid, and it had the same thing where they knew everything. They knew everything about the States, but we don't know anything about that.
Right.
We barely teach anything about anyone other than outside the States. It's this interesting thing that I've found, because everybody else has more history than we do. We're a pretty young country, so
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
There's I agree 100% with you that people should travel to these countries to understand it and learn the language as well,
right,
because there's going back to linguistics, there's a theory in linguistics that basically is that your person, when you speak in another language and you start speaking in that language, your personality changes, and you start being more empathetic to and understanding the culture of that of the people of the language that you're speaking.
right. No,
And
that's
so,
yeah,
and even small things like when I speak in Spanish, uh, the pitch of my voice kind of goes up just a little bit, and I start looking at it's kind of
does your rhythm improve?
yeah, like I have different mannerisms
Right.
in
You start talking with your hands a little bit more.
yeah, I talk a lot more with my hands, and I do
Yeah.
different things because it's understood. Different signs and symbols are interpreted differently. So, but it's super important that people do that, because it would increase the empathy of people quite a bit to do that.
Yeah. I know if I hear a Spanish, it's specific Spanish, like Colombian, Chilean, of course, Argentine, but it's hard for me to decide, because due to soccer, it's hard for me to side with anything in regards to Argentina. But when I hear the Spanish spoken, it's very comforting to me. It feels musical to me, just listening to the way and the emphasis put on certain words and the music of the language. I think it's really kind of an interesting thing. It's yeah, because I'm more familiar with the area, and hearing that kind of those people speak that, and a little bit in Portuguese, from Brazil, even though I don't speak it. there's this sing-songiness to it that you appreciate, that's
Yeah.
interesting. And that you get, I mean you get it in all sorts of languages. You get it in Irish and in Scottish, and it's all different kinds of ways of communicating, but super interesting. And so how many do you know? How many languages did you say you know?
I can speak two languages, English and Spanish. I can read six languages.
Wow. I I
Mostly
heard that
wrote for
Mandarin.
specialties.
I heard Mandarin is very close to Spanish in terms of the sounds of words. Not not not
Yeah, I'm
not
really
in the
looking
not
into
in the speaking, of course, but in the use of tone in the words. You know what I mean? But there
it.
isn't any strange, like some you have to use different. Like I think it's in Farsi. There's a lot of different noises and things you have to do with. I remember I had a guy who worked for me that spoke Farsi and with his parents on the phone, and it always to me sounded like they were arguing. Listen, it just sounded like they were angry at each other. But I was like, no, we're just talking, man. But it was so harsh.
Yeah,
It was just sounded so harsh. It's like German, I guess, too.
yeah, they have those gutturals.
Yeah,
Um, it makes it sound really really nasty, but
I'm
it's
not even gonna try to just mimic it, but it is interesting. So this talk is about creativity and problem solving is what I'm trying to do, and my intent obviously is to try to have people meet people that have done things with their lives, and you've clearly made some interesting choices that have led you into different areas. I kind of like the fact that uh, language somehow brought you into doing this the programming and stuff like that, and how it kind of melded into that. What I mean, I, I have you always been somebody that was kind of open, like because I think some people are like tunnel vision when they live their lives, and then there's other people that have a little bit of a cone thing, where they let in other things and they allow themselves to be curious, about other things. And I think that's
I,
something that's super important. I mean, is that what you found in your life, kind of?
yeah, yeah. I have a real hard time with closed-minded people, um, because it limits so much of what you can learn and what you can do. There's just you have to be able to explore different areas and different aspects of things in order to progress. There's just no way around it. And so when you're closed-minded, it just limits you what you can do in life.
Yeah, it's funny because you can have two different thoughts at the same time. Some people are so confused by this. They think that because you say something, you believe in that 100%. But no, I'm just exploring something new. I'm debating and I'm discussing and I'm asking questions about something I'm curious about because I don't know yet. I don't know where I'm going with this. And a lot of times it's interesting when you get discussions with people that are so positive they're right about everything. They're so sure about it. And then you go to talk to them, it's almost a pleasure to debate them just to see them get a little bit chaotic about it, because then they start to discover, oh, I didn't think about that. Oh, I didn't think about that. Now they're not saying it, but they're thinking it, because a lot of times people won't admit it. If they, that's the problem with debates. Is they don't solve any problems. It's just a
Well,
debate.
I used to do a weird thing when on Facebook. I don't do it so much anymore because I don't really engage too much on Facebook anymore.
Good idea.
Um, but I used to argue a position that I didn't even necessarily believe in because
You're one
I
of
was
those
wanting,
guys.
well, not to antagonize anybody, but I wanted to understand a different point of view. So I wanted to provoke something, a discussion in something that I might not necessarily believe in, just to see what the arguments were and what I could learn from it. And I learned quite a bit from doing that. Just that certain people, when you're talking with certain people, some people talk on emotion, on an emotional level. Some people talk more on a logical level. Some people don't have necessarily an understanding. Others have a very good understanding. And so it taught me how to talk to certain people and how to interact with them on a different level by doing that.
Yeah.
So that was rather fun. I don't do that anymore just because, Twitter and Facebook have become so polemic, and it's just not
Yeah,
worth
it's
it
it's
anymore.
it's it's rough out there. I used to do editorial cartoons, and I remember one time, most of my positions were from a liberal point of view because that's kind of my perspective comes from that angle. But I did one time when Al Gore was running, and I think it was of Ralph Nader, the Green Party, and it was like an Al Gore for president sticker over his mouth. And it was
Mm.
basically, they're just trying to shut him up because he was taking votes away, from. So I put this picture of that and I put it out there. I'd never gotten so many compliments from Republicans in my life for anything I've ever done. I started getting more than I gotten from anybody that was liberal. I got like so many Republicans that were telling me, "Yeah, that's so funny, man. That's so great. It's so true. They should let him talk. Because they should let him do what he's gonna do." But
Right.
it's really interesting because I just showed one thing, and it's like boom, like the dam broke, and it's like, oh, we agree with him. One of my favorite editor cartoonists actually is Michael Ramirez, who's full blown conservative. But my God, his work is beautiful. In terms of editorial cartoon, I can't take my eyes off of his art. I don't agree with anything he says, but I love his work. I can't get enough of it because there's nobody that draws a tank like him. It's like the most amazing, because it's a cartoon tank. It's not even realistic, but it's like the most beautiful looking thing I've ever seen. And but anyway, it's a really interesting dynamic. You got to be open. I've been saying this. We got to live with everybody. We got to live with each other, right? At the end of the day. But I've been saying that forever. No matter who wins the election, the other side isn't going to just up and disappear.
Right.
They're going to be there. So, and we got to hang out. We got to be able to figure. There's stuff we agree about. Let's move forward and think about what we agree on. And I think there's more things we agree on than we don't agree on. Pretty sure they all like their kids.
Yeah, I think so. I think you're absolutely right. I'm going to ask you a question. How do you get over that? I mean, how do we get over this divisiveness that we have?
First of all, is to own it, because I get angry all the time. I mean, I can't not get angry. And if a lot of times when you tell people they need to get along, the first thing they hear is, you need to not be mad anymore about things. You need to not be upset. And that's not that's not the same thing, because you should be upset. I mean, people would not have marched, Martin Luther King would have marched if he wasn't upset about what was happening, right? So you need to have people like that willing to go ahead, but just don't hurt anybody. Don't take a gun. Just you should have the right to believe what you believe and be snarky and do whatever, but just don't hurt anybody. And I think that's the difficult thing about democracy and living in a free country, is that you need to understand that the other side has the right to do whatever they're going to do as well. But then you also have to it's really hard to do, but you have to look at this person that you deep down inside are judging because of this one perspective they have. You're judging their entire life and their family's life and their whole community. And that people tend to, it's more about insulting the other side sometimes than sharing my point. I think that these people show up to these rallies without masks on, not because they're being irresponsible. It's because because the other side wants them to wear the masks. And this is their way of saying, your opinions are wrong and I don't value them, even though I'm willing to put myself at risk just to make you upset. And also telling you I don't believe in it. They probably believed to some, because you can't deny the fact that people are dying, we're getting sick. But it's at that level now. So how do we get to a place where, I think it's just people just need, and I think this is easy to say, but people need to really just grow up, because it is very childish. What's happening is incredibly childish. Is it's not about solving problems. It's about being right, and that's the thing, is everybody needs to play the same game. And so the only way that we solve this is education, and hopefully our kids, they'll learn from our mistakes, I guess. Because people at our age are not going to change much. I don't think people. I don't know how old you are, but I'm assuming that you're older than me, or you're as old as me, if not younger. But I think that we're at a point where we're pretty much who we're going to be. So, but the young people are making choices. So I think that we need to turn towards them. So actually a big reason why I do this is because when I was younger, I was influenced by people that were kind enough to offer me advice and wisdom, and I was curious and I asked questions, and I was surrounded by artists, and I was surrounded by all sorts of kind people, and I think that I feel like I was lucky because I've been able to do what I like to do in my life, and now I'm thinking that there's this platform, and I know some interesting people and some nice people that are willing to share some of their hidden wisdoms with me, and I thought in turn I'm sharing them with whoever's watching, which I hope is people that need to hear this kind of stuff, you know. And like I said before, I said, you know, I think there's a lot of problems, and people like you and people I interview are all solutions. Good people trying to do the right thing, trying to put out a positive message, just sharing a story about what motivated them. I mean, that's kind of what we should be doing, is sharing that with the world and with each other. I mean, I just don't, because I don't see any other real solution. And in terms of
No,
creativity, I mean, you know.
yeah, I 100% agree with you. I think um, going back to interacting with other cultures, one of
Mhm.
the things, one of the big advantages that I've had in living outside the country is that I've met people of all different persuasions, right? I know people that are communists. I know people that are socialists, that are conservatives, all different political, all over the political spectrum. And while we disagree on politics and sometimes very fundamentally, I don't see those people as bad people. They're very good people. They believe in a different political strategy than I do, and a political system. But man, I love them. They're good people.
Yeah.
And when we talk about politics, we'll get into heated conversations, and at the very end, I'll call him a jackass, and he'll call me a mule, and we go get some food.
Right, right. It's a lot like the religious debates too. I mean, I know Christians. I'm not a Christian. I'm not any. I was raised Catholic, and most people that are raised Catholic are fallen Catholics eventually. But I know Christians and that are. I love them. They're fantastic people. We've had long discussions about religion, and I don't debate them and I don't fight them because they're good people and they're trying to do good work and they're trying to do good things and they love Christ, and that's fantastic, because who cares? It makes them happy. It makes them do great things and move forward. I know tons of Mormons out here in Nevada and in Las Vegas area where I live, and my gosh, these are fantastic. They're great people. Now I don't believe anything that they believe in, but man, I love talking to them because they're just very nice people. They're great people, and I get the kids that come to my house to try to convert me, and I love having conversations with them. But it's not a debate because they're super nice. Like they help me with in the yard because that's what they're taught to do. They're taught to serve, and how great is that? That's serving a stranger and helping them out. That's a good message. That's something that's fantastic, and you need to reward them, with kindness for that. And even though I tell them, you could talk to me for like an entire week about what you believe in, and there's no way I'm going to change. And I don't mean to be closed-minded there, but it's just the truth. But man, I respect you, and I respect what you're trying to do. And there's people out there who need it, and it's good that you're doing this. Because if you're starting to get threatened by everything, I mean, geez, the world's a huge place with lots of different people. We need to be more accepting. Because without
Yeah,
people, Joe Strummer, without people, we're nothing. Joe Strummer said, "Without people, we're nothing," and he was right. And if you expect everybody to be on your same hamster wheel, you're fooling yourself. But
yep.
anyway, this got in
So
a
I
weird
think that's
direction.
I think I think getting down to the individual level is would help us a lot. Instead of looking at people's, this group or that group, look at
One-on-one,
people
you're
as
right. Yeah. Think of people as individuals, right?
So I think that's where the internet and Facebook and Twitter and things have done a great disservice, because you're only getting people in sound bites
Right.
or these little posts, and you don't really get the full picture of what that person is, of their struggles, of their triumphs, of how good they actually are. They might you don't get those, and this is again going back to linguistics, but you don't get those extra linguistical things that are needed to understand a person. You only
Right.
get a little bit of the message of what that person is. And so individualism, as we get out and just talk with people and get to know them, I think that's going to be the best way to overcome the divisiveness that we're
Yeah, I
seeing.
think I agree with you. I think you're right about that. One on one, I think we're better one on one, where we can actually show kindness and empathy. I mean, and a lot of the things people argue about online, they literally have no control over. I mean, not that they shouldn't, but I mean, they literally have absolutely no control over the thing that they're so sure is
Right.
they're arguing, whether it's whatever. I mean, like, I want to totally dismantle the school system. Is it going to happen? No, it's not going to happen. But I'll have my opinions about it, and I can share my opinion. But I'm not going to get so hot and bothered, that I'm going to start throwing things and going crazy. But but I love having a discussion with one individual, sharing my view, listening to their view, and then having the courage to have your mind changed is another thing. Is to, because a lot of people aren't able to do that. I forced myself to do it at work, with staff, because we're coming up with a creative idea, and one person has an idea and I totally don't agree with it, but I'm the principal at my office. I'm one of the partners, and I have a staff member who's very passionate about an idea of theirs. So you got to give them a win. You give them a win and let them give it a shot. And if they fail, then there's a lesson to be learned. And if they succeed, then you were wrong. I've been wrong a lot because I let
Yeah.
people go ahead and try something. And guess what? It worked and it was good. And the client loved it. And I wasn't going to let it, if I didn't, how many people say no to these guys and then they're missed out? And then the reward is that employee feels encouraged and empowered, and then they bring better stuff to the table the next time, you know?
Right. Yeah. 100% agree with that.
Yeah, it's not a big sacrifice sometimes to just give in and let somebody.
It's hard sometimes though. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
when you've got really strong beliefs on something, I mean, it's hard to look at somebody and say, okay, let me listen to your point of view when you've already got your mind made up. Um, and that happens with everybody, no matter what, no matter who you are. Nobody's 100% objective
Mhm.
on everything. So we all have our firmly held beliefs, but
Mhm.
the more you can open up your mind and accept new information, the better off you're going to be.
So you're American, right?
I am.
Okay, yeah, 'cause I wasn't sure. It could have been Canadian or something, but so you're raised in America, right? And you're sitting there having a conversation with a communist. That's like that. That's just in some circles, it's unheard of. It's
Yeah.
your base might as well be burning the flag.
Right.
You know.
Right. And I tell some of my American friends that, like, how could you talk to this godless heathen, basically?
Yeah,
I'm like, you really need to meet him. He's good. They're good
he's a
people.
good guy, and he'll outdrink you. But that's so great though, because you're right. Because it is, you learn so much. I have a rule too in my life where if I see anybody like an old person and they're sitting alone, I have to sit next to them and ask them a question or talk to them, because most of the time you learn something amazing. You
Yeah.
just something they have, because nobody wants to talk to them. So finally somebody says they want to talk to you, and they're like, all right, I'll share. And then they start telling you. It's fantastic. Like if you're in a bar and you're sitting there and you start up a conversation with somebody and you learn some amazing stuff. But that's the case with anybody that's 100% different, like totally different than you. People that were raised in another country, they have a totally different view of everything, that you do. Different foods that they like and they understand and they see. And I mean, food is so relevant also in the different foods that people have, and the culture, the different smells. I mean, when you're in a different place, the smells are so different. It's so important to kind of pull yourself out of the box. I think being uncomfortable is a good way to grow. I think comfort is a problem. I think I think comfort makes you soft.
Yeah. And that comes back to the creative slash problem solving that we're talking about,
Yeah.
because the more data, the way I kind of approach these types of situations is, one, some people kind of go from the ground up and say, okay, what's the problem and what are the steps there to get to a solution. I I think that's a little backwards. I think you have to look at what the end goal is, and then work your way backwards to the problem. Because the more, as you have the end goal in mind, logically you can work back and find the data that's going to get you to where you need to be. So you can kind of correct that course. And that's why I like programming so much, because whenever there's in programming, there's not really you can't really judge whether it works or doesn't work, because there's a lot of bad programming that works, but is it going to work over time, and is it going to work for our ultimate end goal? Is it going to scale to what we needed to do, or am I going to have problems along the way as I go and do this? So the more data that you can have in that process, the better off the solution is going to be to reach that end goal. And so keeping an open mind on that is extremely important for the problem solving process, because without it, you're not going to have a lot of success doing that.
I use an example in my workshop, my creativity workshop, of as far as sometimes people like to solve problems with old ideas or old solutions, and they're so used to using the same solution over and over again that they don't know any other way to do it. And so I use as an example as a pencil. A pencil is kind of a perfect tool. It's designed a very long time ago, and people still to this day use pencils. But let's just say you were sick of using a pencil and decided to add something to it, like you added a pen attached to it, or a fan for when it gets warm, or an HVAC system or something. And the pencil eventually stops being a pencil. And I think that sometimes what we do is when we look at a problem, we're not thinking of, well, what was this problem like originally when we came up with this solution for that particular problem? And now, 50 years later, we are still using that same solution, but maybe the problem's different now. Maybe instead of adding to the old solution and turning it into a Frankenstein's monster of what it was, isn't going to help us. Maybe what we need to do is wipe the slate clean. Ask yourself, is this still a problem in this new time? And let's start from the very beginning. Like, erase everything. Let's invent a new pencil if we needed one, or whatever it is. And I think that you might relate to that, because you're the kind of person who builds things from the ground up, from zero, and also has probably asked to dive into a system that's already been created and to make adjustments and change it and adjust it, right? I mean, I'm just assuming here.
Well, we've integrated a lot of legacy systems, mm-hmm. and that are just working off of archaic technology. And we can make them work and create patches so they'll communicate together and create middleware and things like that. But in the end, because this is what happens when like companies merge and stuff, the technology has to talk to each other. But in the end, it's really better to set it up in a completely new system, so that it all works together flawlessly, instead of having to patch things all the time. And so that's exactly what you're saying right now, is that the answer to the solution to the problem back in the mid 1990s is not going to be the same solution that we're doing now. Not even close, because the cloud didn't exist then. And, we have mobile devices, and it just doesn't, a lot of the solutions that were done then don't work now. And right. It's better to just wipe the slate clean and build it from the ground up again.
Well, it's interesting because, we were talking a little bit about how the internet is kind of helpful, but, is also kind of a terrible place to do stuff. But the internet did actually connect us, and we had a good conversation because of it. And I enjoyed our conversation. I think it was really fascinating. So I really appreciate you agreeing to do this chat with me.
I appreciate you having me on.